Greetings to our viewers, our listeners here in St. Kitts-Nevis, in the wider Caribbean, in North America, Europe, Africa, wherever you're tuning in. Thank you for joining us here at ZIZ. We're in the studio with the St. Kitts-Nevis Reparations Committee, and they are presenting the apology. In order for reparations, there needs to be an apology. So the conversation is going to be on that topic, and we're going to allow for people to call in and join the conversation and let us know if you agree or if you don't agree, or give us some suggestions or recommendations on what you think should happen in terms of an apology. I would like to introduce the panelists who are here with me tonight. We have Carla Astofan, who is chairperson of the St. Kitts-Nevis Reparations Committee. We have Rasgruda Agard, president of Tawalde House of David Rastafarian Group in St. Kitts. And we'll also have Dorbreen Omard, one of the three vice chairpersons of CARICOM Reparations Commission and chairperson of the Antigua and Barbuda Reparations Support Commission. So for those of you who are tuning in tonight, I'm not sure if you know what the 10-point reparations plan of CARICOM is, so I'm just going to give you a little explanation about that before we I get further into the introductions, and then we get into the presentations that the esteemed panelists are going to be doing. In 2013, the Caribbean heads of governments established the CARICOM Reparations Commission, known as the CRC, with a mandate to prepare the case for reparatory justice for the region's indigenous and African descendants, communities who are victims of crimes against humanity in the forms of genocide, slavery, slave trading, and racial apartheid. So this document prepared by the CRC proposes the delivery of this mandate with the formulation of the CARICOM Reparations Justice Program. The CRC asserts that the victims and the descendants of the crimes against humanity have legal right to a reparatory justice, and that those who committed these crimes and who have been enriched by the proceeds of these crimes have a reparatory case to answer. The theme, there are 10 points to the reparation plan. During the course of the evening, if I get an opportunity, I will share a little tidbits about it, but you can also log onto the caricom.org website, and you can get a lot of details about the 10-point reparation plan. But the focus tonight is about the apology, and I'm just going to read that one, which is the very first of 10 points of this reparation plan. The healing process for victims and the descendants of the enslaved and enslavers requires at a precondition the offer of a sincere formal apology by the governments of Europe. Some governments, in refusing to offer an apology, have issued a place statement of regret. Such statements do not acknowledge that crimes have been committed and represent a refusal to take responsibility for such crimes. Statements of regrets represent, furthermore, a reprehensible response to the call for apology, in that they suggest that the victims and their descendants are not worthy of an apology. Only an explicit formal apology will suffice within the context of the CRJP. So I'm going to leave that thought with you, and I'm now going to introduce the panelists who will be discussing further their views about the apology. And I'm going to start to my immediate right. I'd like to welcome Rasgruda Agard. He is an educator in information technology. He is president of the Tawalde House of David Rastafarian Group in St. Kitts, and also the president of St. Kitts National Men's Council. He's been studying ancient texts and theological literature for over 15 years and is a firm believer in the Ethiopian Orthodox faith. So welcome, Ras Agard. I'd like to introduce to his immediate right, Carla Astofan, multi-talented Carla Astofan, is chairperson of the St. Kitts-Nevis Reparations Committee, has a long history of working with the Nyabingi Theocracy Order and other groups tasked with building African consciousness. She has given lectures at schools during Black History Month and at African Liberation Day and Emancipation Day events annually, and has been a radio or TV personality sharing her knowledge on various talk shows and panel discussions. Also, as tour director on the St. Kitts Scenic Railway, has afforded her the opportunity to share with her guests her knowledge of history, of colonization, slavery, and sugar in the region. With times on her hand during COVID, she's completed 8 Coursera courses and completed a 4-week course offered at the Future Learn, a collaboration between the University of Glasgow and the University of the West Indies on the topic of history of British slavery, which was launched on the 12th of October 2020. Carla pursued her studies in history and is a graduate of Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College in St. Kitts in 2018, and also graduated the New York School of Interior Design in 1990 and has done many different courses over the year. She's also a real estate sales associate with Coldwell Banker, St. Kitts-Nevis Realty. Her main endeavor is working as a potter the past 28 years, and she owns and operates the Potter's House Studio, and her work is being exhibited at local, regional, and international expositions. So, Carla, welcome. I'm looking forward to what you're going to share with us as chairperson of the Reparations Committee here in St. Kitts. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce our esteemed guest, Dorbreen Omard, who is joining us virtually in the studio tonight. Welcome, Dorbreen. He is an Antiguan-born Caribbean citizen. He is presently one of 3 vice chairpersons of the CARICOM Reparations Commission and chairperson of the Antigua and Barbuda Reparations Support Commission, a government-appointed commission. He's a graduate of the University of West Indies, the University of Toronto, and Tulane University, or New Orleans, USA. Omard is a management consultant with focus on project preparation and management, and business and strategic planning. He works in many sectors across the region, in the areas of health, environment, disaster management and resilience, and policy creation, analysis, and culture. He's a cultural worker, author, playwright, director, calypso writer, judge, and analyst. He is a former chairperson of the Antiguan Jazz Society and a radio TV program host in both jazz and calypso. He was awarded the 2010 Friends of the Arts Sunshine Award for contribution to arts and culture in the region. He is a columnist and frequently invited guest on the national media program addressing a broad range of subjects, but primarily culture, education, reparation, and regional issues. So again, welcome to my esteemed panel of guests tonight. I think the topic of the apology, I can't wait to hear what you're going to be sharing with us from each of your perspectives. So I will invite Mr. Omard, if you'd like to start with your presentation and share with us your thoughts about the apology.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Madam Chief. Let me take a few seconds of my 5 minutes to congratulate the St. Kitts-Nevis National Reparations Committee on staging this panel discussion, chosen to focus on point 1 of the Caribbean Reparative Justice Program, 10-point action plan, known to most in the reparative justice circles simply as the 10-point plan. I wish to make clear that the basis of the call for reparation. The Permanent Court of International Justice has proclaimed that reparations must, as far as possible, wipe out the consequences of the illegal act and re-establish the situation which would, in all probability, have existed if that act had not been committed. The International Law Commission states the basic principle of international reparation law, that the responsible state is under an obligation to make full reparation for the injury caused by the internationally wrongful act. There are 2 additional clarifications. I think that's an important question. Injury includes any damage, whether material or moral. And further, it is only injury caused by the internationally wrongful act for which full reparation. The plan was conceived and accepted by CARICOM as its government as a development plan, specifically aiming reparation resources to those social and economic aspects of our Caribbean existence that continue to bear the damage of the injury caused by enslavement, the slave trade, colonialism, and the system of indentureship. The damage includes the genocide of indigenous Caribbean population. Point 1 of the 10-point plan calls for a sincere formal apology to the governments of Europe as a necessary precondition of the healing process for victims and descendants of the enslaved and enslavers. There are virtually two concepts of an apology. In religious, ethical, moral traditions, it is seen as a redemptive act, one of contrition, the sort of biblical repentance of Job in dust and ashes. Simply put, I'm ashamed, I'm sorry. International legal sense, however, an apology is slightly different. It does three things. One, it expresses remorse, that act of contrition described earlier of the ethical tradition, a concept incidentally not limited or confined to Christianity, but found in the religion. Secondly, an apology affirms the agreement to repair the damage to the best of the apologist's ability. The understanding of restitution, of redress, and a host of other R words. And thirdly, it promises that the illegal act would not be repeated. The CRC, the CARICOM Reparations Commission, however, sees reparations as more than money, more than the ability of Europe to make financial payments to repair the damage done to our ancestors and descendants. It is seen also as an attempt to heal, atone, and bring closure to the human tragedy of mass slavery, to restore a higher moral order by removing the shame and guilt that persistently poison the relations between descendants on all sides of the crime. In summary, it seeks reconciliation between Canada and Europe. And so, understanding that we are dealing with a complex issue, aspects of which may not be defined in simple sentences, questions about which may not be answerable in yes and no or yes or no rebuttals, I offer the following for consideration. If we define reparations as monetary payments, or even as a mix of cash and social or other programs, then an apology is not necessary. Those who commit it can even anonymously make payments to whatever their reparations cause they choose. There are many in the reparations movement, incidentally, who do not care at all for an apology. If, however, you see reparations as the CRC does, where there is practical recognition that we exist in a global environment where partnerships and codependency are important to our survival, then it seems that an apology is an important initial step in any reparatory justice. It is that reconciliation which will pave the way for respectful future relationships. The apology is the demand the perpetrators of the crime against humanity. They are the ones who may choose to ignore it. Doing so, however, does not relieve them of restitution. I thank you.
Thank you, Omar. If you've just tuned into ZIZ, we're here with the St. Kitts-Nevis Reparations Commission, and we have just listened to Mr. Omar, who is one of our panelists, joining us virtually from Antigua, and he's just given us a lot to think about concerning what's been happening with CRC in terms of reparations and reparatory justice. And there is a 10-point plan, but we're just dealing with the apology. And we're looking at, do we need an apology? And if we do, why and from whom? So we've only just begun. He's given us our first bit of information to chew on. Next, we're going to hear from Ms. Astofan, who is the chairperson of the St. Kitts-Nevis Reparations Committee, and then we'll hear from Ras Agard before we get into this discussion. And then later down in the program, we'll open up the lines for the public's questions. Ms. Astofan.
Thank you, Marlene. In order for reparations, there need to be an apology. Do you agree? I tussled with this quite a bit over the last few days when I was given the opportunity to do this, because someone else was supposed to be in my seat. So and even as we thought about the topic over the last few weeks, I struggled with it. An apology is a regretful acknowledgement of an offense or failure. An apology is an act, an expression of regret or remorse for action. The CARICOM 10-point plan, which was created under the CARICOM Reparations Justice Program, asserts that a full formal apology from European governments who for hundreds of years committed heinous crimes against African people through genocide, slave trading, slavery, and racial apartheid, in short, crimes against humanity, is a necessary first step towards reparation. The CARICOM Reparations Justice Program recognizes the special role that European governments, being the legal bodies that instituted the framework, are developing and sustaining these crimes. These governments served as the primary agents through which slave-based enrichment took place. And they are national custodians of criminally accumulated wealth, which built their respective countries. CARICOM is calling, therefore, for a full formal apology. Now, I am having a little bit of a glitch here, so I have to move to my document on my phone. Let's continue. But can healing really begin with an apology? Having pondered this, I ask, what will this sincere apology achieve? Will it change the fact that Africans were treated less than human, that Africa was bled of her children, stripped of all ways of life, culture, language, identity, black skin inferior even today? The media shows us daily the evidence of brutality against the black race, of inequality and racism in so many areas all over the world, that the Black Lives Matter movement was sparked. Our ancestors did not ask for this. They fought against their capture from the start. There was little choice, silence among many. Some gave up their brothers, but that fighting spirit persisted. The need to roam free engulfed them. They ran into mountains, forests, valleys, caves. I recently read Thomson Fontaine's The Maroons of Dominica, 1764 to 1817. And I felt our ancestors' pain. In every country in the New World, it was the same. Haiti succeeded. The enslavers persisted. And in their greed, they never, ever thought of just letting them live and be free. Their need to capture, to slaughter, to kill. Let's reflect on a few names. Men, women, children did flee the bondage of slavery. People like Bala, Farcel, Nani of Accompong, Kodjo, Kofi, Marcus of the Woods right here in St. Kitts. How does an apology placate the horrible death they met for their audacity? On the other hand, enslavers flourished. The economies of Britain escalated. Today they dodge the topic. This apology, which costs nothing, has not been acknowledged, making statements of regret. Why can't words of apology be expressed? But while CARICOM sees it as a step towards mending fences, they already know that the next step after the apology is the payment. Much of the payout made at emancipation allowed Britain to prosper as it formed the basis for economic transformation plan. Just as slavery fueled the Industrial Revolution, therefore Britain flourished for its part in slavery. Precedents have been set before, apologies have been made in other spheres, so why not this? After all, an apology is free. So my take is it could be a huge step towards reconciliation. The scale of hurt felt by the descendants of Africans, the enslaved Africans, could be lessened if a sincere apology was given. It could possibly restore relationships between the races. It could be a start towards putting the past behind. In truth, the past is still with us. We feel the repercussions of slavery, and it is still very raw. I get angry when I read the horrors that transpired and continue to transpire up to this day. I thank you.
Thank you, Carla, for sharing your very deep thoughts with us. It's disturbing. It's very disturbing, probably to the older generations. I hope that we have some young adults tuning in and listening to the conversation, and I really hope that we get some phone calls from them, some comments and questions about this topic. I'm going to reserve my prodding questions until after we hear a presentation by Ras Agard. I'm going to open the floor to you to present, and then we can discuss among our a lot of these thoughts that are swirling around in my head concerning the apology. But I think so far, what Carla and Dobre and Omar have shared with us, they're actually answering the why we need an apology. So let's listen to Ras Agard and hear what he has to contribute to the presentation before we sort of tear apart and break down how this can happen or what we're expecting to happen from governments in regard to this 10-point plan.
Yeah, greetings again. Good night. Hail to all Rastafari brethren tuning in. Hail to all the men council brethren who are also tuning in. I give thanks and honored to be here with these two sisters reasoning this topic. I must say though that from the very get-go with the conversation about reparations, in my knowledge of past, the conversation of reparation was never on its own. It's always repatriation and reparation. And that is something that the Rasta community always been pushing along. But outside of the Rasta community, I'm noticing that we have a different group now coming in, and the concept of reparation is now on its own, and there's no talk about repatriation. Now, I'm not talking about repatriation just in a physical sense, because I think that repatriation starts with the mind, with the spirit, with the heart. I think we have to go back, we have to know our history, and from that point, then we move forward to talk about the reparation and how can it help us to repatriate, whether it is even physically, spiritually, mentally, in whatever form it can. Now, even in the Bible, one of the central themes in the scriptures was about a trad from Egypt, which had to do something with oppression that some even call slavery. But when you look at the teachings was always about the Hebrew people understanding their history, understanding their languages, and all these different things. Now, we're the only people who, in time, and who exist now, who seem to be unconcerned about our history, our languages, and even where we are going. Matter of fact, oftentimes you would hear me, you're always talking about history. The 27th of January is actually International Holocaust Day by the UN. I don't really hear it much around here in St. Kitts, but it's actually an international day for the memorial of the Israeli Holocaust, who like to call themselves Jews. Now, we have no memorial day for our Holocaust, which indeed was a real Holocaust. We have no memorial day for that. We seem to be unconcerned about getting a memorial there for that. And even to honor the memory of our ancestors, this don't seem to be anything that is in the minds of our people. Now, I'm saying all this to get down to apology, because no form of apology could even start the process of the healing and the atrocities that was done to our ancestors. Now, in 1953, Germany made an arrangement to pay some reparation to the Israelis, again, who call themselves Jews. It was not until 1990 that Germany actually gave an apology for the said Holocaust. So it's like we are now talking of it in reverse. First have to be action. First we must deal with us. We have a lot of issues among ourselves right here in the Caribbean. Even just recently, when the issue of the cannabis was in breach of our constitutional rights, a conversation went out to ask the now government to bring an apology towards all Rastafarians who had suffered at the hand of the government and breaching their constitutional rights. And not even that we could get. So if we can't deal with ourselves to apologize for something that our government have done, how could we start a process of healing for our ancestors with an apology from people who we don't even know? People who we even have a whole industry want them to come here and carrying them around in taxis and so on. Their ancestors, their descendants to be on our land. I just think that there's a lot of work that we have to do. We have to understand that reparation and repatriation definitely should be together. And again, it does not have to be in a physical sense. And who knows, once lobbying and moving forward and trying to get even the UN, maybe one of the first steps, I'm not hearing it in the 10-point plan, but maybe one of the steps is to get a memorial day from the UN to be observed by the world of our Holocaust. We're not even asking for that. But that seemed to be one of the things that we can do, because if we do have a memorial day, then it begins, definitely begins. But we have nothing. All we have is just a lot of talk. So this lot of talk, we need to step it up and start to get going. And it's not about an apology. I am totally against the talk about an apology. What I think happens is that once we move forward, once we start to repatriate our minds, and we start building ourselves. Look at it. We have our own government. Black-skinned brothers here running our country. We have control of our own education system. So why aren't we teaching our children about our Holocaust? If we don't do that, they'll never understand it to be a Holocaust. It would just be as people are today, who are more interested in entertaining themselves and entertaining others. And I understand something that Omar had said about damage. This probably is a damage from slavery as well, because to be entertaining your slave owner for 400 years, after a while you probably don't want to stop entertaining. So we seem to be focused on things like carnival. Matter of fact, I don't even know how many festivals we have going on in St. Kitts on the calendar of festivals. But we seem to be concerned more about these things than to educate our youths about our Holocaust. Educate our youths so that seeing that we didn't step it up, maybe they can step it up, maybe they can effect the change and have UN have a day for the memorial of our Holocaust here in the Caribbean for 400 years. And who knows, that can definitely effect an apology. So I give thanks for this. Vibes here to be amongst you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. You said some things that kind of piqued my interest in terms of the young generation and education. You spoke about different, us celebrating and honoring different traditions. Other people are being recognized and have days of recognition for what happened, in their history. What role do you think education has to play in that? In terms of educating our Caribbean, our young adults in the Caribbean about their history and African history about the Hebrew Israelites, colonization, because I think that we're seeing the psychological scars of what our ancestors went through. The Caribbean was colonized, and there's still remnants of that in terms of the structure, the way that government is run, business is run. There's certain things that are like colonial residue that's left behind. Either one of you, any one of you can address this. Why are we not learning? Why we're not teaching our children this in the school system? Because I think there's a direct correlation with education or lack of it and a wider understanding of the whole reparations and apology. I think that just in my opinion, again, when you get a chance to call in, you can correct me or you can correct me now, but I think that our young generation is not interested, and I'm trying to understand why, and I think there's a direct correlation with the school system, the education, and maybe what they're getting and not getting. So how can we get them to feel what we're feeling as elders and knowing about the history, to get involved in or feel like they should care about the apology?
The more we as the adults talk about it, is the more they will become interested in the topic. I think all of us would have gone to school here in the Caribbean, and we see that CXC has changed from when I was going to school and doing General Certificate of Education, which came from England. You got very little. But even at that point, I began seeing our place, like asking questions. And so that is what persons have to do. This is what children has to be inspired to do, to think. And I think they actually do. With this happening, and a lot of times I say, where did I get this consciousness from? And I sort of put it towards the fact that at school you were learning some history, but then I realized I grew up in the era of the Black Power movement. I grew up in an era where my uncle was a Rastafarian. I was hearing about the Black Power movement. The guys at the school, the boys' academy, were removing their ties. Their hair was popping, and so on. So and they were talking. So I was listening. And so it started to build a consciousness. The African Liberation Day started off in the 17th. I was a little girl. So the same thing that was happening then, we the elders are doing it now. And it is for those who are paying attention, they will continue the work. They will pay attention, they will want to read more, they will want to study, investigate more. And I believe right now we are talking a lot more. And I believe the teachers themselves are a lot more conscious. But as Ras Gruder said, there's a lot of other things distracting people, that's not making them focus. I myself get distracted as well. But we have to keep pulling it back to here, so that we can understand that there is something that we need to work. And Gruder brought up about repatriation. That's another point on the plan, and that is something we will delve into. It's not, we're not dismissing it. It's just that we want to talk about the apology today and get people's feedback on it. And so this is our focus, right? And so that's where we're at. I think it is if teachers can make it lively within their classrooms, like I said on other programs, the children will get it. They will understand. I can go on my computer, I can look at this, I can research, I can do this instead of wanting to look at Peppa the Pig, for instance.
I mean, I've heard,
if I may,
it's said
okay,
that if it's not in the curriculum, because the curriculum for school is so packed, the teachers very rarely stray from the curriculum that they have to teach. So if it's not in the curriculum, then unless you're a teacher that takes risks and tries to incorporate like local culture and local history into your teachings, then the children aren't really going to be exposed to that. I want to find out from Omar. Are you with us, Omar, in Antigua?
Yes, I am. I'm back in.
Can you share with us what is the feeling in Antigua in terms of reparations, the 10-point plan? Can you give us your take on the kind of feedback that you've been getting from the community? Are people rallying behind it? Are you still in an education process to see how people feel about reparatory justice?
Just before I answer that question directly, I think we need to be careful in the last discussion of blaming youth for any sort of disinterest in this particular topic. I mean, these are not topics that young people are automatically attracted to. It is part of the educational effort, I think, that we must put in to encourage them to broaden an understanding of themselves, an understanding of their history, an understanding of their country. And I think that it is the task faced by every single reparations commission across this region. A number of changes are taking place, yes. For example, the St. Lucia National Reparations Commission has launched a lecture series specifically for secondary school students, where these issues are discussed. Across the region, there are all sorts of quizzes, all sorts of competitions, all sorts of efforts, sorts of effort to broaden the appeal of to students, to young people for this particular issue. Here in Antigua, we have been the Antigua and Barbuda Reparations Support Commission. We have been at it for quite a few years now. We go back to about 2007. And we have established a fairly standard package of educational advocacy activities over the years, revolving around special dates, special commemorations, the Black History Month, Africa Liberation periods, etc., etc. We perhaps are, and this is not unusual, I think, for organizations like ours, unable to really give a firm sort of scientific answer on impact and what the impact has been. But I like to suggest that I don't meet people in Antigua presently who don't know the word reparations. I don't meet people who do not have an understanding of the impact of slavery on African people here in this country. The intricacies, etc., are still, we still need to do work to help the population, to sensitize the population to the work we're doing. And our reasoning for that is quite simple. I think our politicians, not only here in Antigua, but across this region, expect the push to come from us. They're the ones who are eventually going to have to interface with Europe at the table. But right now, I think they need us behind them so they can go to Europe and say, listen, this is not me. My people are saying this. And so the work continues. The work continues. As I say, I think we certainly are a lot further ahead than we were, let's say 5 years ago, than we were 3 years ago. And hopefully continues to grow the same way.
What do you say to people who might say, oh, you're still talking about that? That was in the past. Get over it, move on, move forward. You have things good now. How do we address that kind of rhetoric and disrespect in terms of what we're trying to achieve. It's so huge. It affected millions. Millions of our people were massacred, tortured, enslaved, put to work without pay. Just putting it in very, very simple terms and very mild, but I'm encouraging people to go online, do some research. It's the internet age. You can search for anything to do with colonization, and enslavement. I don't like saying slaves, but enslaved Africans or enslaved people, because people are not born as a slave. People are born as human beings, and then somebody else enslaves them. So how do we deal with this apology? You've given us, in your presentations, you've given us the why it's important to get this apology. But how and from whom? We want the European governments? Do we want the banks that were established back then that processed all the money that was extracted from our people, from the country? How do we do that? How do you appeal to people who knew that what they were doing was wrong and continued to do it? Where do we start?
I am not on the side of the apology, of course. But I would just like to go back a little bit to where you were talking about education a little. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. The two main forces in our island and probably across the whole Caribbean are the churches and the politicians. So the education have to go to them as well. So it's not just in the school. As a matter of fact, once you could convince the politicians and the church leaders, it automatically finds itself into the school curriculum. But to try to force it into the school curriculum, and our politicians that we are electing, who themselves have no desire for understanding their history, it's like you're climbing up this high hill that it's going to be very difficult to get that done. So I would want to suggest that the conversation go to the politicians, the leaders of the country, the leaders of the church, because once you could convince those leaders, then the ball start rolling. Because what we have to understand is that if your agenda do not fit into the agenda of the politics, in the sense of what is happening in the country, what is happening in the region. I mean, we could look around. I've mentioned earlier about the situation with Rasta and cannabis, and no politician want to apologize because they probably think they have done nothing wrong. So what do you think the countries in Europe gonna say as well? They probably don't think they did anything wrong as well. So it's like we have to make sure that we have support. The leaders of the Caribbean, if they're the ones who have to stand into the midst of the European councils and what's not, without education, then that makes no sense. So if there's a way, but then educate the politicians first, educate the church leaders second, if you have to put an order, and then, because you want it to be a continued process throughout time, it goes to the youths next. So it's not the youths first, no, it's the politicians first, the church leaders next, and then it finds its way right down into the educational system. I firmly don't believe that it should start with an apology. I said it earlier. 1953 was the start of reparation for the Israelis. 1990 was the apology. So why should we go the backward way? So I just wanted to add in that part.
Well, it's interesting the position that you've taken in terms of you don't want an apology, because we teach our children, if you do something wrong or you take something from somebody, you must apologize.
Let me explain that then.
You must apologize and then, be sorry for what you did. Show remorse,
Right.
Ask for forgiveness. So I'm being the devil's advocate in that context.
Where he's coming from, because as I said, I myself struggle with it. But the thing is, as I listened to someone last night, they said, one of the things is this is something so that we can begin to feel a sense of confidence. He was saying a while ago something that triggered a thought for me. What happened to all of the people around the world, besides us in the Caribbean who have black governments and who, you know, don't have the same dynamic? You know, you see in America what is happening. You know, they're struggling, black people are struggling to get the vaccine. They're struggling to get proper housing. They're struggling for the best jobs. You know, everything is a fight. In England, our Caribbean people, or people from Africa, the black skin is what they see first. And so if we get that apology, it changes the whole dynamic for everybody, everywhere around the world. Tell us, I am sorry that this thing happened. It should not have happened, but it happened. We cannot undo what has been done. We are very sorry that you had, because remember, black people are seen and are still being seen as less than. Black people have to endure quite a lot. Like one woman said, people say to her, oh, your intelligence must come from your lock, your hair, that you have so much hair. Or, why do you speak? You're so different from the rest because you're speaking more, quote unquote, good English. Like we're not, so many microaggressions happen to our people. And so this apology can go a long way. As you heard in my presentation, it could go a long way. Okay, it changed the whole dynamic. Let us feel that sense of confidence that everything is now on equal footing. Regardless, let us put the past behind us, even if the past is still very present. Another thing I'd like to support him with is the fact about the different organizations, from the politicians, the churches, and so on, because as Dobrin was saying, we need that push from the society. We need the society, as he said, CARICOM is making that push so that the governments could make that presentation. So that is what we need for it to come from the bottom up.
Can I just,
Yes.
can I?
Yes, definitely.
A couple of things. I think we need to understand in the international sphere of things that an apology from a European government commits that government to reparations. And that is why they dance around it. That is why they offer statements of regret and all sorts of other ways of trying to say they're sorry. But they will not offer an apology because of the international legal sense of what an apology does. As soon as they do that, they are committed to have the talk about reparations. I would want to react a bit to Brother Guda's comments about educating politicians, educating the church. The CARICOM reparations movement is actually politically led. It was established by the heads of government in this Caribbean. And the commission itself reports to what is called the Prime Ministerial Committee on Reparations, where five heads of government sit, reviewing our work, accepting or rejecting our recommendations, and urging us in the directions that they think are most politically feasible for reparations to happen. And so, in a sense, that education of our top leadership, I'm not suggesting that we do not have naysayers, perhaps in our own parliaments, in our own cabinets, but at least at the heads of government level, we do have support and guidance from our politicians. As far as concerned, if we go back, to the Church of England, the Church of England has apologized for this, The Church of England back in 2007 issued an apology to African people, African descendants, about their role in enslavement. But it is what we know as, apologize and run. So you apologize, and although you're committed to the issue of reparations, and this is where we come in, that we have to help the church to formulate a program for reparations. The World Council of Churches has also acted. You see, we have seen over the last couple of years a lot of these organizations becoming more morally aware, ethically aware of their role in the oppression of African people on the continent and in the diaspora. And they're coming out. The banks are coming out. The universities are coming out. The manufacturers of iron and guns and bullets, etc., they're coming out. The finance companies, they're coming out. And it's important, I think, that we just continue to put that pressure on them through our work, through our writings, through programs of this sort, that the movement perhaps blossoms a lot larger. We have seen the impact of the work we have been doing even in Black America. The North America African Reparations Commission prides itself on being modeled on the structures of the Caribbean Reparations Commission. This is not how we saying this. They say it to us. They too have issued a 10-point plan. So the point I'm making is that I don't think there is any sort of sequential approach to this. Not politicians, church, and then I think it's very, very broad. And we need our various groups who are committed to reparations, whether you're committed to apology or not, you're committed to reparations, that we continue that struggle. And the struggle must ultimately lead to Europe coming to the table for discussions with our governments to deal with this particular issue. And just one additional point in this whole question of apologies. At least here in Antigua, the Rastafari community has received an apology from the government of Antigua for the treatment of Rastafari, certainly back during the 70s and 80s. And that apology has come with a special offer to the Rastafari community for participation in the medical marijuana industry at no cost to the movement. The admission fee, if I want to call it that, to the medical marijuana industry is something, I think, in the region of $150. I could be wrong. It could be more. It could be less. But it's quite a decent figure. And a part of that reparations that the Antigua government has offered to Rastafari includes entrance into that industry.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, because the question that maybe some of our listeners would like to know is, well, what happens after the apology, or what is the impact? So that's an excellent, thank you for sharing that with us, so that it's good to hear what's happening in other Caribbean states to inspire other groups and committees that want to rally around reparations. And it's almost, because it's something that has impacted our ancestors, and it's something that you could say we're kind of detached from. But this is our history, this is our story, and sometimes I feel like we're ashamed. We're ashamed to talk about it, because the atrocities and how horrific it was. Some people don't want to see those things. I mean, it's nothing that anybody wants to see, but I think that in itself should encourage us further to fight for this change, fight for the whether it be the apology or join in the movement, have a better understanding of how being enslaved has impacted our society, the way we think, about ourselves, about each other, and who should be accountable? How do we reach them? Because Rasagruda, you mentioned church. Now, church was a main institution that endorsed and embraced enslavement of Africans, of our ancestors. So how do you approach Rome? How do you approach
But they have
church
apologized.
system?
Most of them have apologized already.
Yeah, no, not just for the apology. I'm going
okay.
a step further.
Oh,
How
okay.
do you? They've apologized, but how do you get them to rally with this movement?
We have to get our own people to rally with us first. That's basically what I'm trying to get across. I'm not against, as you put it earlier, someone apologizing for something that they've done wrong. My issue is an apology is something that the person have to want to do. It's an apology. They have to feel that remorse, that regret, that sorrowful feeling. For you to tell somebody that they should apologize, it's not the same thing. So I'm saying that once we work on us, get our people in order, get them to rally with us. Now, in terms of the government and all of that, look at what's happening here. I don't know how it is in Antigua. Look at what's happening in our school. What African language is being taught in any one of our school? Look at the way we dress. Matter of fact, you cannot go to the courthouse if your shirt is not in your pant. Where did that come from?
And that's a European
Exactly.
fashion.
So what I'm saying is that
Yes.
if we can't even fix these issues, then why are we going to tell somebody apologize for something that we can't even fix the things in our own place? We're not even fixing. Look at the people we elect to lead us. Do they have any interest in history? Do they have any interest in making sure that we understand our own languages? I mean, the Chinese are all over the world, and I'm sure those children know the language. People from Iran go places, Iraq go places, check them, they know the language. What language we know? We only know the 4 languages that brought us out here. English, French, Spanish, and Dutch. And that's all we teach in the schools. As a matter of fact, that's all that our people want to master right now. No African language.
And that's the residue of
Right.
colonization.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is
European
we have to
territories.
fix us. We have to fix us, and I'm saying that once that work has been started, I think it could effect an apology. But to go out and say, well, apologize first, and then that would make the people like accountable or whatever. We have no data on that, because all of the apologies that happen on their own. And a matter of fact, wherever reparation was paid in our history, there was no apology first. The apology came after. So this is what I'm saying. We're going backward with this.
No.
So again, I'm not against an apology. I'm just saying an apology should be genuine. It should not be something that you're asking for. I think that if we make the right strides, the right approach, and really start to get our people to rally behind us, you think those people cannot see clearly that we're not together? So why would they apologize? So, but if we were all together as a Caribbean force, a Caribbean force, a federation of the entire Caribbean region, and everybody is rallying behind this thing, that would easily affect an apology. But we're so divided in politics and religion. That's why I mentioned church and politics, because these are the 2 most impactful systems that we have with us. So if we could get the politicians educated about the history, if you could get the church people educated about the history and understand the Holocaust, and it should not be hard for the church leaders, because the central theme in the scriptures is about knowing yourself. It's about a particular people that was chosen, who was also in some form of bondage, and the elders made sure that the children know the history, know the language. So in the scriptures alone, it have that theme already there. So it should not be hard for the church leaders to understand the Holocaust that we went through. A matter of fact, the same scriptures actually have a prophetic sound in there that spoke about bondage or slavery that will happen in a certain time with a certain people and what's not. And we are the only people in history that fulfill that.
The Hebrew Israelites.
Exactly. So
We've lost our identity.
dealing with the church should not be hard.
Yes.
Dealing with the politicians, on the other hand, might be a little bit more difficult. But I say maybe let's focus there. Let's focus on us first. Let's don't make it look like we're so thirsty for money that we're going to tell people, well, you apologize, and then when they apologize, it forms some kind of accountability, and then you could take them to court and all of that. That has not been done. But there have been reparation paid, and apologies came after the apology. I mean, after the reparation have been paid, and to me, we are going about it backward into how we are thinking about it. Now, again, I'm not saying it is wrong or right to have an apology for us.
Right.
This is my position.
Which you're entitled to.
I think that we need to work on us first and effect that apology whenever it comes.
To our listeners, our viewers, if you tuned into ZIZ, you're here with St. Kitts-Nevis National Reparation Committee, and they're presenting the topic, the apology. In order for reparations, there needs to be an apology. Do you agree? If you want to get involved in the conversation, you can call one of the hotline numbers, 466-2666 or 662-8674 or 767-4765 or 1-239-645-4500. We'd love to hear from our listeners. If you want to call in and give us your opinion about the apology, do we need one? We have a caller?
Hello.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. I just want to make a few comments and maybe ask a question or two. I hope I can do so in quick time. Now, Carla said, among other things, that an apology costs nothing. I'd like to remind her that that is not necessarily so, because an apology exacts from those who are apologizing from their character, from their reputation. One has to step down from his high platform of sense of invincibility, egotism, superiority, etc. And I partly agree with Mr. Dobreen that an apology would lead to an expectation, a legitimate expectation, of a commitment to reparations. So an apology does cost. Then Ms. Astofan also said that she gets angry when she learns about or hears about, reads about the continuing inhumanity and brutality of man to man, especially when blacks are on the receiving end of those atrocities. My question to her is, does she think that an apology, even reparations, but we're talking about the apology, would an apology put an end to the current instances and practices of inhumanity being meted out to blacks? With respect to Mr. Agard, he spoke of repatriation. My question to him is, how is reparation concretized, whatever form it takes? And he speaks of different forms that it may assume. In his view, how do we materialize, how do we manifest repatriation? Do we need an apology for repatriation to occur? As a matter of fact, what is preventing, in his view, repatriation from taking place now or even before now? And with respect to Mr. Dobreen, my question to him is, what real leverage, what real power or force can CARICOM access or employ in order to take the demand for reparation from rhetoric to actual action from Europe on the colonizing powers, those who benefited from slavery, with respect to an apology or even reparation? What can CARICOM actually do apart from engaging in a multitude of talk, as it were? Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for your inputs and your questions. Can we go to Mr. Omard? Do you want to address the question that he put to you directly?
The question of what can CARICOM do.
What kind of power? Yes.
I think we have to be very clear. We don't have guns and we don't have bombs to go to Europe and force them into reparations. And so that our force is a moral force. It's an ethical force. It is a force that must be brought to Europe through all means available to us. Diplomatic means must also be used. For example, right now, the United Kingdom has taken all it can, has squeezed all it can out of the European Union, and so it has withdrawn this thing called Brexit, and it is now seeking to re-age the Caribbean, which it sort of deserted back in the mid-70s when in the European Union. And part of our force is insistence to our Democrats, to our diplomats, and to those who negotiate on our behalf that Britain must not come back into this region with dirty hands. They must come with clean hands, and clean hands will mean that they at the table and deal with the history of our relationship, and deal with this issue of reparations. I know we get this question all along, how can we do this? How can we do this? But clearly, within the last decade, we have seen at least one European country has expressed its preparedness to come to the table. We have seen others who have asked for more information, and the dialogue is in progress. We have seen the number of reparations commissions among European reparations commissions. That number of commissions is building. We have seen the universities, the University of Glasgow, University of London. There are a couple other universities that have been forced, that I don't think that's the right word, but have been, encouraged to look at their own history. And when they look at their own history, they are discovering their links to slavery, and they are making reparation moves or reparatory justice moves to deal with this. So the question of force, 15 million of us in this region, we don't have, the concept of force is not what it sounds like. For us, it's moral, it's ethical. We can do this through international law, and essentially our institutions, the church that the brother has been talking about, the church certainly must be involved in this. And I say that they are involved. I mean, I have done addresses at churches here in Antigua where the clergy have requested further information. Only about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Anglican clergy across this region met in discussions about reparations. So these things are happening. And they may not be happening as fast as we want, but clearly, whatever force we have organized and is exerting, changes are taking place at this point in time.
What I'm hearing from your answer is education. Education is very, very important about the 10-point plan. Education to the churches, to young adults, to our elders, to government officials, to the institutions, the people that participated, or the companies that are still around that were party to colonization and enslavement. So I'm going to direct a question to you, Ms. Astofan. As chairperson for the St. Kitts-Nevis committee, what sort of awareness, this is this discussion, and I understand it's a regular thing that your committee is doing. What other ideas, or are you seeking ideas of how to reach out and educate the St. Kitts and Nevis population on this topic?
Let me just answer from Mr. Blake, who asked a question with regards to the apology and where I see it, and I do think I answered that all I'm saying is that it could. Okay, so I'm not saying it's will, I'm not saying we don't need the apology. All I'm saying what could happen, and I think it could go a long way towards mending fences, towards change in race relations towards building confidence among our people. To answer Marlene's question, what is the St. Kitts-Nevis Reparations doing? Besides doing this, we are hoping, one of the things we had on the agenda was to create a competition among our young people where they can express themselves, whether in some artistic way, whatever medium of art they'd like to pursue, whether visual, and I know you, as a person in culture, you know that's our thing. So whether visually, whether performance-wise, in whatever way they would like to, they could showcase their how they view reparations. But for them to be able to do that, they must be given information. So the idea is to go to the schools and talk to them about it, just like we did for years. We have actually been going to the schools during Black History Month. So we are trying to do the same thing. Let us go to the schools and let us talk to the children about reparations, let them understand, ask questions and so on, and then out of that they can do further research and come up with something, whether it's a painting, whatever it is. That's just one aspect. We are hoping, even with this COVID era that we're in, and I think Antigua has started doing it already, the wearing of masks, reparations now, that could be something. Last week I sat in on a joint meeting of persons from around the CARICOM region, and a lot of ideas were espoused. So there's a lot of things that we can do. One of the things I am thinking of right now, I saw that Jamaica, I read it some months back, and I know I mentioned, someone actually sent me a text, Carla Peppa Pig. I mean, why kind of, I touched on that. So yes, I sit and watch it with when my daughter was smaller. It just came to my mind. But anyway, at that age, that young age, how do you teach about the history? Okay, and I think Jamaica, I believe, is developing something to be taught even at a kindergarten level. So you're not going to go with them, rah, 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 get their energy, you find a way. So there are people looking at that, and I think they're close to creating a coloring book. We have seen the changes over the years. Our people are writing more, we are seeing more stories being brought to the fore, so that's development, that's seeing yourselves in books. Like we were growing up and we were, the books we had at our fingertips were totally different to what my children are reading now, so.
I think it's very important what you're talking about in terms of visual imagery. Some of the psychological scars of colonization is that we have been taught that if we have black skin, it's not beautiful. We're not pretty. We have curly, kinky, thick hair, and we've been taught that we need to make it thinner, straighten it, color it. And these are European values and images, and we don't see enough, in my opinion, enough images of ourselves in beauty. I've seen it in a position of beauty, I remember I was at a beach here in St. Kitts, and I was sitting in the sand, and when you sit in the sand, you just rub sand on your feet, try and get them smooth and stuff like that. There was a little girl sitting next to me, and then she came down and she was imitating what I was doing, and she's like, why are you doing that? And I said, oh, because I'm old, I'm trying to get the old skin off of my feet. I said, but your skin is beautiful, you don't need to do that. And she turned to her mother and she said I was beautiful. And that affected me, because I was like, why is it our black children are not feeling beautiful? Why do they feel ugly? Why do they feel they have to change their appearance, bleach their skin? And these kind of imageries, these, again, I consider them to be residual scars from colonization, European, incarceration, I'm going to call it.
And all of this.
Yes.
Sorry.
I didn't want to go on, but before I come to you, Omar, I do want to give Agard a chance to respond to the caller, and then I will come to your comments if you don't mind.
Okay. We have 10 minutes.
Repatriation, but well, I just said it. And repatriation is not just the physical movement of the human being from one place to the next. It actually starts with the mind, with the mental part of it first. It also does not even sometimes have anything to do with the movement of the person from one place to the next. Sometimes it's just the connection that you have with the land, whether it is that you're sending back stuff, you could have like a trade, for instance. And all this is forms of repatriation. And it actually started, maybe not so much in St. Kitts, but you have persons from Jamaica, from Barbados, who are already repatriated. And they're there right now living. There was some land actually secured for that to happen. So when the days that Rasta used to talk about repatriation and reparation, the reparation was to help you to resettle when you repatriate. That is what it was all about. Today we can't ask people who don't know about repatriation to repatriate. I'm sure most persons here in St. Kitts are very happy with their homes and what they have going for them. So it's not always a physical construct. Sometimes it starts, well, not sometimes, it always have to start with the mind. So I would just like to say to the caller that it have started, and hoping that it would probably continue, and it is not just in the case of moving physically from one place to the next.
Thank you. Thank you for that, for responding. I hope our caller is still tuned into the program and is listening to this discussion about the apology. Omar, can we call upon
Well,
you?
I don't want to. I don't want to jump forward into Carla's and the St. Kitts Reparations Committee's program. But the second point of the point plan is about the issue of repatriation. I think the C has recognized the Rastafari movement as being very, very critical in maintaining a Caribbean focus on its history, maintaining a focus on the motherland, on Africa. And the CRC has therefore included in this justice program the issue of repatriation. And I'm sure, I guess point two, Carla and others will be discussing this. But just suffice it to say that the aim it is, I think, in the CRC program, it is physical in a sense, that the demand is for regularization of the issues that make movement from the Caribbean to Africa by those who wish to do so, to make it a lot easier than what exists now. We are estimating about between 20 and 30,000 Caribbean people who have gone back to the continent, but they are facing all sorts of issues of education for the children, health care, immigration issues, access to land, etc., etc. And the CRC's call is for governments to regularize those sorts of issues. But I think certainly that there will be a fuller discussion on this. And just before I go, again, this issue of the whole psychological trauma that we have experienced, which I think the chair has expressed, and what the Guru has expressed, and certainly, yes, and certainly Carla has expressed this also, is that a part of the reparations plan also addresses the psychological rehabilitation of Caribbean people. It is what we here in the Antigua and Barbuda Reparation Support Commission see as an internal reparation, where there is work to be done on ourselves, and work that does not require any input, any reparations input from outside of ourselves. That work around skin bleaching and the long hair and the disdain for culture, for things of Africa, the disdain, or the rejection, even issues like African religions and African languages, etc. That work is also part of the work of the national commissions that are established all across this Caribbean.
I'm just going to let people know that you can go to the CARICOM reparations.org if you want to learn more about what's happening in the Caribbean in terms of reparations. The 10-point reparation plan of CARICOM Reparations Commission deals with a full formal apology, which is what we're looking at this evening and discussing. Repatriation is number 2. Indigenous Peoples Development Program. Cultural institutions, public health crisis, illiteracy eradication, African knowledge programs, psychological rehabilitation, technology transfer, and debt cancellation. So there are 10 different points to the plan. We're only thinking about discussing the apology. Is it necessary? Do we need one? The impact of that, and what you think about it. Our panelists, I'd like to ask Ms. Astofan to let our listeners know if they want to get involved in St. Kitts-Nevis Reparations Committee and get involved in the work that is going to be happening here. How can they get in touch with you?
Thanks again. I really think this has been a positive program. This is something that, of course, could have gone on and on. People have a lot of strong thoughts surrounding whether there should be an apology, whether there should not be an apology, what an apology can do. So I think it has been very valuable this evening, this discussion that we've had. We will be embarking on looking at the other points. We don't want to just jam everything together. So if you have thoughts, if you want to be a part of this, if you want to be on any of the programs coming up, please let us know. I'm on Facebook. My phone number is on my TV, very helpful. There is Rahim Berry, and there's also a representative from the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. So Mr. Satney sits on our committee as well. But there's a lot of other people who have indicated that call on them. And I'm very thankful that Marlene, I was able to call on you, Ras Gruder, who came to the last session that we had as well, Tony Frederick, Greg Herbert, Dr. Ahmed Reed, who was on the last program. So all of this, if we could, I'm very happy to have had Dobreen Omar join us. So I'm going to be looking at the wider Caribbean, looking at us here in St. Kitts, and we're going to keep it happening. So just contact us and let us know. Thank you.
Okay, Ras Gruder, would you like to share some parting thoughts with us, as I know our program is winding down, and then we'll hear from Dobreen Omar.
Well, once again, I give thanks for being here to be a part of this. And I would just like to say to the Reparation Committee that education is really, really critical. And, it really, really means a lot to me if our leaders were involved into our historical issues, and at least I know they went to school and they had to learn something, but to drift away so far that there is no interest into our ancestors in terms of honoring them, because honoring our ancestors with some of the things that we are doing is like almost a slap in their face for the blood that they shed for us to be here. And there's a million things to be said about that, but I would just like to say that for the committee, I think that education should be one of the most important things, and I would also ask that you guys even go not just into the reparation in the international sense, but even as Ahmad talk about the issue in Antigua, where the government apologized to the Rastafarian community, that speak to the government here, because it's crystal clear what have been done, and we had to go to court. We had to go to court for that to come up, and the case was won to show that yes, you actually did interfere or breach the constitutional rights and privacy of these people. And why there is no apology? So I would just recommend that you all could push on that a little further and see what can happen.
We got your work cut out for you. Mr. Omar, some closing remarks?
Well, yeah, just to say what a pleasure it has been sharing with my colleagues in St. Kitts-Nevis. The members of the CRC, I think we all stand by for opportunities like this to share these ideas all across the Caribbean. Carla a bit earlier mentioned that she was recently at a meeting of national commissions. There were 12 national commissions present. I think one or two were absent from that meeting. And so we do have quite a regional thinking on this reparations matter. We are ably led by Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, and as a movement, we feel quite good about the progress that we have made. We recognize that we're in a marathon. We understand that this is a sprint. I like to step outside sometimes and philosophy and perhaps even go to these Chinese proverbs that suggests that we should put trees under which we shall never sit. That's what we are doing here. We are planting a tree, never sit. But for sure, our children and our grandchildren and future generations, future descendants of African people have the opportunity to sit in that shade. And so our call to persons listening, persons viewing this program is to join us in that process, be it in education, as Brother Ruda has suggested, being part of the whole psychological, we have for the trauma that we have experienced as a people, that we don't even like our own skin and we don't even like our hair that comes from us, etc., etc. So I think, yes, there's work to be done. It has started. It is quite intense, and it will continue that way. So thanks again, especially to Sister Carla. Thanks again to moderator and fellow panelists, Brother Guda. It was quite enjoyable for me being here.
Thank you very much for joining us. We enjoyed your comments and sharing certain things that are happening in Antigua in terms of reparations. So I just, in closing, like to thank Dorbrino Mard, one of the 3 vice chairpersons of CARICOM Reparations Commission and chairperson of the Antigua and Barbuda Reparations Support, Ms. Carla Astofan, chairperson of the St. Kitts and Nevis Reparations Committee, and Rasgaruda Agard, president of Telwada, House of David, Rastafarian group here in St. Kitts. We want to thank ZIZ for allowing us to come on the program and discuss this very important topic, and we look forward to coming back and sharing more information with you about reparations, and it's been a pleasure being a part of this whole discussion. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you.